Hello, my name's Tom Palmer and I'm the author of a book called Over the Line. Excuse me. I'm doing this short film now for Newcastle Boys School because the teachers there have asked me to speak about this book. So Over the Line, which has two different covers. This is about a footballer called Jack who was a real footballer who played for Huddersfield Town, who went to fight in the First World War when football stopped in 1915, and he went to fight in the Battle of the Somme. And Jack actually survived the First World War, but some of the other footballers, such as Grimsby Town's Sid Wheelhouse, didn't survive. And when I was writing this book, it was really Sid Wheelhouse who sort of got into my heart, and he's the sort of the one that I really emotionally engaged with in while writing the book. So I'm just going to read you a really short bit, and then I'm going to talk a bit about how I wrote the book, and then I'll attempt to read a bit at the end. This is the first page. It was the day of my debut as a professional footballer. My dream had come true. But even when your dream comes true, you have to keep trying. Within a minute of kick-off, Fred Bullock passed the ball to me. He was my team captain at Huddersfield Town. I controlled the ball with my left foot, then played it wide to our winger. So far, so good. Now it was my duty to get into the penalty area. I was a forward. I was a goal scorer. Our winger would cross the ball soon. I had to get upfield. The mud was thick on the pitch, even though the game had only just begun. A Grimsby defender tracked me as I powered towards the goal. Sid Wheelhouse. His deep furrowed frown made him look like a bull, and he was big and strong. So that's how we were introduced to Sid Wheelhouse. And the reason he's important for me in the writing of the book is that when I was writing the book, I read things such as this fantastic book, which is about a history of trench warfare. Well, fantastic in some senses. Then another couple of reference books, like this is a Great War Handbook for anyone, sort of for families involved in looking for historical records of their family members. And there's also this book, which is the Officer's Manual, to the Western Front. Books like that help. So did this, actually. This is a series of graphic novels or cartoons called Charlie's War, which is about the First World War, and things like that helped me. But the main thing that helped me and changed how I thought about the book, the writing of the book, was going to France. And I went to France, where they fought near a place called Albert and Bethune in the Somme area of France. And so this was England footballers. The England captain, Jack Woodward, fought in the trenches. His job was to clear unexploded bombs in the trenches, and inevitably one of them went off. He wasn't killed, he survived, and he went on to be involved with Chelsea, where he'd been captain and a player. Anyway, when I went to France, I found the grave of one of the players. I found the grave of Sid Wheelhouse, who's the character we've just met in that first section. And me going to Sid Wheelhouse's grave changed the whole writing of the story for me, because Sid was just a defender in the first part of the book, and then at the end of the book he dies in a gas attack. That's what happened to him. And when I wrote the book, he was kind of a device to show that he can be on the pitch one minute and dead the next, and that was wrong. To make someone who died for our country a device in a book, and going to his grave, which I'm really glad I did that, made me realise that. So I fleshed out his character. I made him much more of a three-dimensional character, and got to know about him, and that helped me enormously, going to his grave. And so this is the end bit. This is what happened. In fact, no, I'll read that at the end of the video, actually. So once I'd researched and found out about Sid Wheelhouse, he became a bigger character in the book, and I did my duty towards him, and having done his duty towards us 100 years ago. And one thing that happened was I received an email about a year after the book came out from a man called Tim Wheelhouse, who was serving in the RAF, and he was the great nephew of Sid Wheelhouse. And I was very nervous that he wouldn't like the book, that he wouldn't like the way I describe his great uncle's death by gas attack in here, and I was worried that he wouldn't be happy with it, and fortunately when he read it, he liked it, and so that worked out well. And I think the reason it was is because I went to the grave of the character. I went to the places where they'd fought, and rather than becoming a book that I was writing for my own artistic purposes, but also to earn money for me, rather than being that, it became sort of a passion to want to talk about the footballers who fought in the First World War, and it became much more meaningful for me. And that's why, anyway, I'm going to read you the end bit about Sid Wilhouse, because that seems appropriate today, because I know you're watching this on Remembrance Day, 11th of November. So this is the end. So Sid has just been in a gas attack and it looks grim. The field hospital was an old barn with a tarp over its caved-in roof. Rain hammered down on the canvas as I sat next to Wheelhouse. Wheelhouse was lying on his side, his knees up to his chest. His skin was pale and moist. His cheeks were sunken like an old man's. He reeked of the vile gas that was now in his lungs. Wheelhouse put his hand on mine. "Jack," he asked, "will you write a letter?" "I will, Sid," I said. I'd never called him by his first name before, but then he'd never called me by mine. There was paper and a pencil on top of the upturned shell crate. I reached for them. Sid took a breath. "Agnes Wheelhouse," he said, slowly. A breath. 32 Neville Street. Another breath. New Cleethorpes. Breath. Links. Then he had to rest. He wheezed in and out and in. Flecks of bloody foam came from his lips. I could see the panic in his face. He was afraid he might not finish the letter, his vital letter. That fear forced him to try again. It took almost an hour for Sid to dictate the letter to his wife. He spoke in strings of 2 or 3 words. "My dear Agnes, I hope this letter finds you, the family, well. It is bad this time, my love. Do what you must to care for the children. When Arthur is 14, please give him my football medals. I promised him them. Do what you need to do for yourselves. Think only of yourselves. Please tell my mother and father that I remembered them. Tell them that I love them. Stand firm. I am forever at your shoulder. Your loving husband, Sydney." And that I made that letter up, because we don't know if he dictated a letter. Well, there's no record of him doing that. I made it up, but I based it on the letters and the things that I read in books like this, based on real letters of that soldiers had written back from the front, and so that's the story of. It's supposed to be the story of Jack, but it is actually, for me, it's become the story of Sid Wheelhouse, and that's why. Anyway, thank you very much for listening.